Thank you very much, and it is really lovely to be with you this morning. It's nice not to have to dress up like a proper vicar. Often I end up in churches where I have to dress up in all sorts of dressing up gear, and I don't. I can come and be normal, and that's really lovely. If you don't know what I do, well, largely neither do I. I'm the Archdeacon of Stoke-upon-Trent, which basically means I work with the bishops to look after all the churches, Anglican churches in Mid and North Staffordshire. So people say to me, well, where's your church? I go, which one? I've got 212 of them. So it's really good to be here. But I've got a question for you this morning. What do you really, really want? What do you really, really want? Anyone want to answer my question? Peace. Anyone else got any answers yet? Love. Joy. Happiness. So I didn't hear one up there. So I missed one up there. Don't worry. Hope. Healing. Contentment. Kindness. It's a good one, isn't it? Well, unlike the Spice Girls who really, really want zigga-ziggar, which I've never worked out what zigga-ziggar is, most people, if you do all, people do all these surveys around of different people, and most people, somewhere in the top 3 on all these surveys will come peace. People want peace. We want peace. So, have a think. What have you been worrying about this week? Anyone not worried about anything at all this week? You've not worried about anything? Okay, well done. I have to say I have worried about things this week, and I do all the time. You think of your things. Yesterday, a couple of days ago, my worry was, how will I get the weeds out of the soil in my garden? Because it's such heavy clay and it was so baked on dry that you couldn't get the weeds up. Of course, it's now rained. I got a bit worried because a friend I'd texted a week ago hadn't texted me back, and I was trying to arrange to do something. I'm like, oh, have I said something wrong? I've got a bit worried by finding that I've been away on a retreat and I've got so many emails. When I came back, it was like, right, how am I going to deal with that? I've been worried about a colleague who's really ill, and the people in a parish up near the top of our diocese where their vicar died a couple of weeks ago. I've been really worried. I've got quite a long list. Doesn't mean that I don't go round happy or content or full of joy, and I wouldn't tell you normally about all these worries, but deep inside, actually they're there. And of course that's before we get to switching the news on or flicking to it on our phones and see what's going on in the world. We need and we want peace. I don't know if anyone got a sort of Bible verse stuck on their fridge, a fridge magnet. Anyone got any fridge magnet verses? Even if you haven't, you know what I mean. We get them, don't they? Nice sort of things to put up. And you get one in today's reading when Jesus says, peace I leave you, my peace I give to you. We like that idea, don't we? Put it on nice little things, slap it on the fridge. So why are we all still worried then, if Jesus has given us peace? Fridge magnet verses are often something, we put things on there because we really, really want to believe that they're true. And we want that promise, if it's a promise of Jesus for ourselves. But there's a bit of a gap with our everyday experience. And so we have this weird thing of what we do. We stick it on a fridge magnet and stick it on our fridge. I think almost trying to see, well, if we have it up there and we notice it often enough, maybe it'll get inside our hearts. Well, maybe more of a hopeful question than why don't we have peace, given that Jesus has promised it to us, because he has, and we've just read about that. Maybe we could think about, how do we find the peace and experience the peace that Jesus has given us. How do we get between that gap, between that, what we believe is true, because it's in the Bible, it's in God's words, Jesus has said it, and this is the honest reality of deep down in my heart? Well, I think we have the answer, which I have never ever seen on a fridge magnet anywhere, which is in verse 28. Jesus says, "If you loved me, you would rejoice that I am going to the Father, because he is greater than I." Anyone got that on their fridge? Or quote that to themselves frequently? It's never popped up in my, verse of the day on a Bible app that I have on my phone. Let's just think about that, because I think that, from what Jesus is saying here, is how he helps us get past this gap. So if we're honest with ourselves and haven't completely found peace, I think we're in really good company when we go to the Bible, when we come and meet Jesus' disciples. And that's what I love about when we read the gospel readings every week. We're learning about Jesus and what he said and did, but we're also meeting these disciples, these special 12 people who are with Jesus all the time. And I think, oh, you're a bit like me, really, aren't you? The fact that we worry and haven't got peace is nothing new. Jesus, in our reading, is telling his disciples that he's going to leave them. He's telling them that he's going to go to the cross, and then he's going to rise again to life, and then he's going to ascend into heaven. To those disciples, that is not good news whatsoever. That is a cause of stress and anxiety to them. This reading, and I don't know if you've been following the lectionary, you haven't. It was just because I was coming you thought you'd pick the lectionary. Okay. He tries to behave sometimes. This reading comes in, it's basically what we would call Maundy Thursday, and it might seem a strange, so that's what happened just before Easter, just before Jesus died. And it might be strange to be reading after Easter, when we're sort of still celebrating Jesus' resurrection. It might be strange to read what happened before Jesus died and rose again. But in the chapters where we get this from, we learn from Jesus himself what living in his resurrection is meant to truly mean in reality. It's like his last sort of message to his disciples. If you're not going to get anything else, then remember this and get this. So for those of us who were reading the lectionary last week, we heard about Jesus telling his disciples, he's told his disciples just before this that he's going to go somewhere where they cannot follow him. And rather than going, oh great, this makes great sense, because we can look at it and go, because Jesus is going to rise from the dead and go back to heaven. That was really upsetting news for them. They'd been following Jesus 24/7 for 3 years. They're just beginning to figure it out, they thought. And now Jesus was leaving, and he was saying they couldn't even go with him. From the disciples' perspective, they were doing just fine with Jesus physically there with them. Surely that is what they needed to help them find peace and to stop worrying. But now he's determined that they have to understand that everything is going to change and he's going to leave. And yet in the middle of this, he says, peace I leave with you. No, Jesus, you're causing us a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. But Jesus says something about this peace that he's giving them. He says it's very different from the peace that the world gives. He's offering something that is very different. First, there's something different about the nature of the peace. And then there's something very different about how you go about finding it. So let's just think of those. I wonder what you think about when someone says they found peace, or they're looking for peace, or what we think we're looking for when we say, actually, we could do with some peace. Maybe if our governments could just do their job properly, and people would stop taking advantage of other people's weaknesses. Wouldn't that give peace? Or if the rich would stop building their fortunes on the backs of the poor, and people would take responsibility for the harm they cause. Maybe then we could have some peace in the world. Maybe then our hearts could stop being troubled, and we could stop being afraid, like Jesus said. Maybe we could stop worrying, and our collective blood pressure could be under control. We think that if people would just stop arguing and listen to one another, there could be peace. If we could just be satisfied with what we have instead of trying to consume more and more, we could find peace. Maybe if we could find ourselves a job that gave us enough money that we wouldn't have to worry about feeding or clothing the family, then we'd have the peace we want. Or if our health would improve, or if we had more resources to do our job, whatever it is for you. We think of these things, wouldn't they just fix it? And then we could have peace. But that is the peace that the world offers or encourages us to seek for. But the trouble with that, even though some of those things are good things to pursue, at best they're a bandage over the wounds of our fear and our frustration. They're only a temporary fix, because the next problem's going to come along. Sorry to pop the bubble and disappoint you with that. It's just a temporary fix, because another adverse circumstance will come along. The biblical idea of peace is grounded in this Hebrew word, shalom. Shalom. Shalom is more than the absence of strife or conflict. In fact, one of the indicators of Jesus's, of Christ's shalom, is the way, not that it does away with conflict and difficulty, but it sustains us through the middle of the reality of conflict and strife. Shalom indicates completion or wholeness. It's pointing to a time in the future when everything will be made right, not just a sticky plaster, but everything will be made right, and it will be put into God's intended balance for creation. It's a great picture to think of, but Christ's peace is about allowing us to have that hope for wholeness when everything is made new, to have that peace and that wholeness now in the present. It's about being confident that that isn't just a possibility that that future will come, that it is a certainty. And that the peace that Jesus offers is that invitation to live in that certainty. To know that as people of God, as his children, he's given it to us now. The kingdom of God is at hand. It's not just about some future hope, but we can start living it through him living in us now. The peace that Jesus gives is eternal, in contrast to the temporary nature of anything else we might find. But it can begin, that eternity can begin this moment. Our hearts do not need to be troubled, not because there's nothing wrong with the world. There is a lot wrong with the world. But our hearts don't need to be troubled because Jesus is risen from the dead. And if Jesus can come back from death, then we can believe his promise that he is preparing a place for us in heaven, if we believe in him, where we absolutely will go and be with him. We don't need to be fearful because God the Father loves us perfectly. And perfect love, as we're told in John's letters, casts out all fear. We can have confidence that we're invited into and held in the resurrection of Jesus. That is our identity. That is the truth about our lives. And all the other stuff is noise around it, but that cannot be shaken. Jesus calls us his children. Romans, Paul says he died for us while we were still sinners, so it doesn't matter that our lives are a mess and maybe we're not held there because our lives aren't good enough. Jesus died for us and rose again for us so that we can be held in and be part of his resurrection. In Paul's letter to Philippians in chapter 3, he has this verse which I really, really love. Paul says, when he's in prison and his life in human terms has gone as wrong as it could, he says, I press on to take hold of that for which Christ has taken hold of me. You ever imagine that? I always imagine that sometimes as I'm walking along. And I was going to demonstrate this on Mal, and I wouldn't, because that's your hurty shoulder, isn't it? I'll do it to him. He's just come along, and he's got my shoulder like that. And he's walking along, and I might go, well, I want to go over there, and sort of wander off. And he's just like got this iron grip, and it's like, he's got hold of me. And you can kick and scream, and you can try and wander over there. But when we have come to know Jesus and believed in him and trusted him, Christ has taken hold of us. I have no other grip. Doesn't matter whether I'm trying to reach out to Christ or not. He has taken hold of me. That is his promise to us in Jesus. And so that is the nature of the peace that he offers, is that we can have complete confidence that he is now in charge. But as well as it being a different type of peace, it's a different route to peace. Now, sometimes when you think of finding peace, I don't know, in a big picture what you think of. We're hearing a lot on the news, aren't we, about who's going to broker the peace in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. Are the Vatican going to have a role? We had all sorts of world leaders, if you were following the news a couple of weeks ago, all in their different jumbo jets. I can't remember where it was they all went to, and all had some sort of big powwows. We might think of the United Nations trying to work out what obstacles can be overcome. And it all gets really complicated about who talks to who, in what order, and how we sort of say, well, we'll take a little step here and let's come to that bit later. It's all exhausting, just the idea of creating, of building, of finding peace. Now, I wonder whether we feel that about our own lives. It's like, I'm exhausted anyway. How am I going to work to find peace and make my life peaceful? It's just chaos. But Jesus says nothing about working to find peace. He says nothing about helping us create peace in our lives. He says it's a gift. I'm giving it to you. And it's a gift that doesn't arrive in an Amazon Prime van from some anonymous house somewhere. I have a question. Now everyone's accusing each other of buying too much on Amazon Prime. I can see it going around. Or via Yodel, or via Every, or whoever else your favourite delivery company is. But let me ask you a question. Where is Jesus? Literally, now. Where is Jesus? In your heart? Everywhere? At the right hand of the Father? Okay. I'm not going to ask you to answer this out loud because I want us to be deeply honest about it. When you pray, where are you praying to? Where's Jesus and you're speaking to him in your prayers? I was going to say I have a little friend. She's a woman in her 30s now, given my age. But I remember when she was little and her grandma died, and she decided to draw a picture for her grandma because that's what she did normally, so she still did. And then she got it, and then she walked out into the garden, held it there and went, "Look, Grandma!" She'd drawn this picture and was throwing it into some form of void. I wonder whether that's actually what we sometimes maybe feel like and do when we pray and are speaking to Jesus. It's not the theoretical answer we know, but in our prayer lives we're going, Jesus, God, somewhere, please answer me, please engage with me. Lord, I've got these issues in my life. Help, I'm going to pray about them. And even if we believe that Jesus is in our hearts, we sometimes start praying to this sort of otherness out there. I have this fabulous book. Ever come across this? Finding Jesus. Have you come across Where's Wally? Yes. Excellent. This is full of, I can pass it around, you can have a look. It's these amazing pictures. I should have got it and put it on the screen, where you have all these really complicated little pictures, and you have to find Jesus in the middle of it. And they do give you a clue right at the start. Here we go. You get a little picture down here. That's what Jesus looks like. And then you have to find him in these things. I have spent hours and hours and hours going through this book with one of my godsons. And however many times we've gone and we're determined, so we find Jesus. And then next time he comes to visit, we do it again. I can't find Jesus anymore because I've forgotten where he is. Hidden in all this massive stuff that is going on. I wonder whether, in reality, when we're worried and concerned, that's where we're looking for Jesus. Somewhere out there in the middle of this. Jesus says in verse 23 of our reading, anyone who loves me will obey my teaching. My Father will love them. This is the verse I'm putting... No, this isn't the one I'm putting on a fridge magnet. My Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. We will come to them and make our home with them. Think about that. The people who have made their home with you are the ones literally living life with you. They're the ones you can't get rid of. They're the ones who are there when you fancy them being there. They were the ones who are there when you quite appreciate it if they weren't. They're there in the good times. They're there in the bad times. They're there in the mundane things as well as in the exciting things. They are physically close and sharing your life all of the time. Jesus says he's not distant, that the Father is not distant. Yes, the Father, Jesus, is seated at the right hand of God. But whilst being seated at the right hand of God, he's here. So if you've got an empty seat next to you, there's Jesus. If you haven't got an empty seat next to you, and there's only a little gap between you and the next person, Jesus is there, next to you, now, here. So when we come to talk to him, we're not talking at some point. It's easier for me to have a conversation with him than it is for me to have to talk to Malk, or to Lynn, or to Tina, or anyone else. Because he's always there, because he has made his home with us. If, he says, we love him. But if you read that word love, that's not about if you feel loving enough towards him. That word, which is agape, which has many interpretations, but a key amount to that, thing about that agape, is simply about being open and being welcoming and seeking the other person. So he's saying, if you're just opening my heart to me, and you're asking me, then I'm here. That's as simple as it is. I don't know if you've ever looked after picked up, as it were, a distressed child who's bawling their eyes about something they're worried about. And you just go and you hold the hands and you just go, look at me. I do this to my godsons all the time. Okay, Theo, just look at me. Bull, bull, bull. Just stop it. Just look at me. And when he finally turns and looks at me, the tears just melt away, and whatever the anger, the frustration, the distress just melts, because he suddenly feels safe. He knows he's with someone who loves him, and he's holding him, and he's going to fix this with him. That's where Jesus is for us. When we're worried, he's there. He's going, just take my hand, just look, I'm here. Look at me. When did you last notice Jesus and the Father? Because they're inseparable, close to you. Here, as we worship him, as well as when you go about walking home, doing whatever you'll do tomorrow. Jesus is that close than our own breath. But we just need to notice and to look at him. It's amazing how we forget, isn't it? on this retreat I was just on last week, I had this amazing experience which made me cry. We're having communion as we did every day, and I felt Jesus, who I was conscious of sitting next to me, just saying, I'm going to hold your hand while you go out to communion. And I was just like, that was just so amazing. I thought, oh, this is just amazing encounter with God. And when I sat down having received communion, I realised that by the time I'd stood up from my seat and stood in that line to go forward, I'd forgotten that Jesus had said he would hold my hand. It may be just me that's completely unspiritual and bad, but I think that's what happens for many of us. We forget. But the good thing is, that hadn't made Jesus go away. He was still there, just waiting me to come back and notice him. My peace I give to you. My peace I leave with you. It's such a better peace than the world gives. It's an invitation to go deeper and deeper and deeper into relationship with the Father, with the Son, and with the Holy Spirit. To receive that peace, we just need to constantly keep welcoming Jesus into his eyes, into our lives. Just keep looking at him. Just keep looking at him. So back to my suggested fridge magnet, why wouldn't we be glad that Jesus had returned to the Father so that we could know the reality of him and the Father making their home with us? What better thing could we want? Their love is closer than we can imagine. So we're going to dare to do that and dare to look into Jesus' eyes this morning as we continue to worship and continue to take communion.